We recording?
We are.
All right. I've been notified that this is being recorded for legal purposes. Apparently, that's a thing. So this is a new realm of the Broken to Unbroken podcast uh, with my friend April. April and I go way back. I've known April since I moved to Texas. And April, can you kind of give us a little bit of a background? Like the first thing I remember about April is like if there could be a Cowboys cheerleader and a CrossFit gym, like that was April. Like you give her some pom poms and she's just like cheering everybody on in the workout. And that was like the first memory I have about April, like 10 years ago, is I'm like, who's this crazy girl that's over in a Cowboys shirt, like jumping around, cheering people on when she should be doing her own workout, but she's still kind of doing her own workout. And so thanks for taking the time to record a video podcast with us, because obviously I have a face for radio, and people are freaked out. They'd be like, bring back the microphone and like chill with the video piece. We have enough of you in the morning.
Oh, not at all. So, Nick, it's awesome to be here. And I will say that I did ask Nick to do video because I love having great content. And I knew having a conversation with you would be super interesting and people would love to see it. So, thank you for doing that. As far as the Cowboys cheerleader thing, you know how they say those who can't do teach, those who can't CrossFit cheer and say, hey, you're doing an amazing job. I loved CrossFit, but it did not work for me long term. I was probably too into it and too competitive with myself, and didn't last long with it. I was afraid I would be in the injury world before too long.
Yeah, some people kind of OD on the Kool-Aid, and they're like, "What is chest muscle, and how do I train it really hard at maximum intensity under time domain?"
Right. That's what's so great about all the unbroken minutes and things that you do, because I feel like you have all of these great things that you give people that talk them through why some of the stuff that they might do naturally would not work for them long term.
Yeah, like as because doing CrossFit since 2006, I kind of do CrossFit light now, to where
Mhm.
I walk in and I'm like, not doing that. Like there's a couple of workouts that I've sworn off for life, and I'm like, no, I just don't want to do that. It's 5 a.m. Not enough coffee to convince me to do that this morning. It's not for everybody. I tell people, I'm like, I don't care if you do Zumba or jazzercise or you jump around on one of those rebounder trampolines, or like, as long as you're up and moving and you're doing something and you're not sitting on the couch being negative and you're being healthier, like, I don't care. Like, go do something.
Just move.
Like, I don't care if you do some of that like crazy walking with weights and it looks like the unicorn parade. Like, just get out there and do something. And it's not us to judge. Like if you're judging someone for their mode of exercise, it's like judging like a homeless person in the unemployment line. It's like people are out there and they're trying to move, and everybody enjoys different stuff. And so I think it's important. And I think CrossFit really kind of caters to the type A former college athlete or super type A, like driven business owner, which is, I think, why you were attracted to it early on. Cause like, you're like, all right, show me a benchmark. I'll crush it. Like, give me time and I'll find a way to do it. If I have to sacrifice my body, I'll do it.
Oh yeah, and there were those days. You remember, you were there.
Yep. So, can you give us a little bit about your background? I know that your people know where you came from. I know where you came from. But our listeners, I think that you have a very interesting background, and just kind of go into where you grew up, and like the different careers you were in, and then we'll kind of segue into your business and current ventures.
Sure. So I grew up in the South in a tiny little town outside of Chattanooga called Soddy Daisy, Tennessee, which is more of a place to be from than a place to go to. And because of that, I joined the Air Force right out of high school and traveled all over. I got to live in Europe and Asia and just do some really great things, but it also paid for school. So I did that for about 7 years. When I got done in the Air Force, I actually went into the financial industry and worked there for quite a while, about 15 years, and had a great experience at a couple of companies, got recruited to a software startup that was just a fantastically amazing company. It was right at the beginning. I was employee like 99 or 100, and they now have like, I don't know, 700 employees, and they're worldwide at this point. So had an amazing experience there. And what was so fantastic about that organization is because they wanted to grow so quickly, there was no caps from a sales perspective. So I ended up having my best year ever in corporate. After making 7 figures, I was like, there's got to be something else for me to do. I want to help people in a different way than I'm doing today. And I sat with it for about 6 months, just thinking about it. Do I just want to be in leadership at this company? And finally decided, you know what, I want to start my own company. And when I originally started it, I didn't know exactly what it is that I was going to do, but I took the leap anyway. And that was over 2.5 years ago. And it's been an amazing ride.
Yeah. And I think that parallels like why I started the podcast and the blog,
Mm-hmm.
but zero comparison because this has cost me some money, made me zero money. And it will no way replace like my daily earnings career anytime ever. But I'm like, I don't quite know what the mission's going to be. I don't quite know what niche I'm going to fill, but I know I have to like brain dump some of this stuff. And I think that it's important if you're successful in your career, that you're able to kind of magnify that process and kind of help others. It's more gratifying, and at least it helps me get out of like the daily grind of like, okay, there's another ankle sprain, another hurt low back. Like, yes, there's those challenging Dr. House cases, but like this provides me kind of a creative outlet when you're with a large company, and like sometimes I want to go try weird and crazy stuff, but you can't do that with 300 doctors at scale.
Right.
Like I want to turn the ship on a dime sometimes and just go, let's just go do this because I have a crazy squirrel moment. And I'm like, okay, like, let's try this crazy thing. And like everyone in management's like, dude, pump the brakes. Like we got to steer this big ship slowly. I'm like, no, roll it over. Let's go.
So you
But this gives me a little bit of freedom to kind of experience that. But I think that we kind of had parallel paths in that way, but you're just making money and you're making a career out of it. And I think that it takes a huge amount of like courage to go, okay, like
courage or stupidity,
a lot of
depends
like
on the day. Courage or stupidity, it depends on the day. Maybe being
but
naive.
I think it's pretty like reflective of somebody's like confidence in themselves to
Mhm.
like leave the comfort of like just like, okay, making good money, like I'm doing well in my career, to like flip your comfort zone on its head, body slam it, and just go, all right, let's get uncomfortable so I can get better and kind of achieve a new tier in like growing as a person.
It's true. Yeah, I did have like FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, because there were awesome things about the company. And I was like, oh man, what if it goes public? I wanted to go to New York and ring the bell. I wanted to do these different things, and the people there were amazing. But my fear of missing out on what I might do on my own was just bigger. And it just pulled me to go, you know what? Let's just pull the trigger and we'll figure it out on the way down. What is it? Like jump out of the plane and figure it out as you're going?
Yeah. So I think that what was the most difficult part of making that decision as far as like, what was like the last strand of like going, okay, all right, I mentally kind of teased that out. Like now I'm ready to do it.
Okay, so full disclosure here. I felt like I could run the company I was at. As crazy as that sounds, like I was like, I could do this. I could run this company. I have these great ideas. I have things that I could do to really contribute. But in the traditional scale that we have in the corporate world, you're never allowed to do that, right? You have to be elected to go and run a company, so to speak, right? Be hired to be the CEO or any of those things. And I realized at one point that I had always, quote unquote, played the game right? Wanted to be promoted and get into a higher and higher position. And that doing that, somebody else was controlling my future. And I knew that I had the ability to do it on my own. And at the end, I was like, why don't I just name myself CEO of my own company and really make a difference for people? And that's how I ended up taking that leap.
Yeah, like I could maybe run the company that I'm at for like a day and we'd be bankrupt because I'd be like, donuts and ice cream. Let's buy a bunch of expensive gear. Let's outfit this joint. Let's bling it out.
Let's stop talking to the insurance companies. They're annoying.
Yeah, let's go cash. So what is your day to day like? What is your company called? What's your mission? Who do you work with?
Okay, so my company is called Driven Outcomes. My day to day is different every day because there are some different services that I offer. So I can go into a company and do something that we call CEO on the go, where literally someone, this usually works for either serial entrepreneurs or someone who wants to take a sabbatical. I will literally come in and take over their company as CEO and run it for them for a period of time while they focus on other things. That I can also do something called CEO Jumpstart, which is where I come in and almost function as a chief operating officer. Not almost, I actually do. I sometimes take on that title in the company. And I can be doing several of these simultaneously with different companies. I am right now. And what I'll do is, alongside the CEO, who might have these amazing creative ideas like you, let's go buy new equipment, let's do this, let's do that. I'll say, okay, well, here's how we'll execute that. And I'll stand beside you and show you how we do that and build some processes and put some things in place so that when I leave, you've got this even better running company. And the other thing that I do with folks is do a acceleration boot camp where I take entrepreneurs and leaders through a process to either grow their company or grow in their position or make that next step in life. And that's more of a normal, typical business coaching type scenario. The normal thing being the times that we meet and everything else being a little different and definitely accelerated. We move things much faster than people are used to. But what's awesome about that is the amount of results that they can get super quickly. So that's a little bit about what I do. Some of the folks I've worked with every different industry. The best thing about my job is it transcends industries. So I've worked with trucking companies, metal companies that do trading, real estate companies and commercial and personal real estate, interior design. It really doesn't matter. A liquor company, whatever they do, lots of Fortune 500 companies and things like that, whatever they do, what they need, the processes and the people and the culture, that all tends to be the same regardless of the industry. And then it's just fun to learn things that I never would have needed to know before.
Yeah, and I think that almost like reading Ray Dalio's book Principles,
Mm-hmm.
like there's a lot of like I'll learn stuff about my field reading about stuff from like books on like the trades and mechanics, and like there's a lot of these principles that hold true across fields, and it doesn't have to be super trade specific or like business specific. With that in mind, like working with like your day-to-day like small business owners versus like your Fortune 500 like executives,
Mm-hmm.
like just like my line of work, to where like everybody's a little bit different, but everybody's a little bit the same. Like I tell people, you're special, but you're not that special. Uh, like we see a lot of the same patterns in medicine, and I'm sure you see a lot of the same patterns with like artificially imposed like barriers and limits and fears and mindsets and things that like hang people up. What are the most common things that you see across the board as far as being like people's plateau generators, so to speak, that you go in and you can kind of like make them aware of those because you're on the outside looking in and they may be unaware of them?
Right. That's a great question. Number one, I think having anyone, whether it's me or somebody else, objectively look at your business is huge for two reasons. One, they'll see your blind spots. They'll see things that you don't see because you're too close to what you're doing, or they'll do what I always say, they'll call your baby ugly, right? This isn't going to work. This is whatever. And people inside your organization, whether they just fear reprisal if they speak up and say that, or whether they're just so ingrained in it they don't see it, they're not going to. The other thing about having someone objective come in, especially someone who doesn't necessarily know your industry, is they're going to ask those gee whiz type questions that other people in your industry would never ask because they take the answer for granted, or they think they'll sound stupid saying it. But sometimes the best ideas come from there. To answer the second part of your question, the things that I see the most that hamstring people are, one, their mindset. So it's really interesting. And, you talk about athletes all the time, right? And it's so the same in business, where people can either have this winning mindset where I will get to my goal, I will overcome, I will do whatever it takes to get there. Or a lot of times I see people with this scarcity mindset. We don't have enough resources. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough skills. We don't have enough of this. And I actually talk about the characteristics that either help or hinder people from accelerating. And those are two sides of the same coin of one that is just huge for limiting people. The other one that I see the most is literally just fear. Fear of change, fear of doing something differently, fear of taking a risk, fear of being out there. And what really sets people apart and gets them to this next level of success is if they're scared, but they're willing to do it anyway. I don't need anybody to not be afraid. That's not realistic. But if you can be afraid, but do it anyway, those are the people that are doing things like I'll work with someone for 3 months and their revenue will be 4 times what it was when we started, because they're willing to move through the fear that they had about doing things differently than they'd done it before.
And couple points relating to like my field compared to what you're doing is like I mentor some other docs, and a lot of times like they have it's almost like an excuse generator to where it's like, well, they added another practice right next to me, or like there's not enough docs that are referring to me, or I don't have these resources. And it's just like, you can either come up with excuses or you can figure out what you need to do, look it in the mirror to get better, to build your practice. And like our company leaders, they're very well aware that like we see about 7% of musculoskeletal complaints. Like, so there's 93% of an untapped market that don't even know who we are.
Huge growth.
So it's just like, okay, it's not like we have access to 100% of the market and like we're just shuffling the maxed out saturated like market around. Like there's a lot of people that need help from a musculoskeletal like doctor that they don't even know that there's anything out there besides pills and like your general like, all right, let's just sweep this under the rug with meds.
Right.
And I think that another thing is some people, if they don't have processes in place, like they get overwhelmed to where they may be really crappy delegators, or they don't have the right people in place. They don't have a system. They don't have a operating procedure. And when they get too busy, they almost self-sabotage without knowing, to kind of get them back to their comfort zone of what they can tolerate, like doing on their own. Do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and with a lot of entrepreneurs, so my sweet spot is businesses with revenue between 5 and 15 million, sometimes up to 20 million. Folks can get to that level by themselves with an assistant, a few employees, etc. So they don't have to put processes in place. And folks that have worked at big corporations, part of my background is you know what it would take to scale. And a lot of folks, when they first start their companies, they're never thinking about scaling, because you're an entrepreneur and you know this because you run your own practice. You're doing so many things that building these perfect processes for somebody else to execute later is the last thing on your list. You're going to do that after you get a good night's sleep, which is going to happen in 2 to 3 years if you're a really heavy hitting entrepreneur, right? Although I'm a big proponent of, I would go sleep over accomplishment every time. It's just too important. But I see that where they don't even know to put them in place. And by the time they get to that breaking point where they're really realizing they don't have the processes, it's so overwhelming. It's like sticking a 3-year-old in a really dirty bedroom and say, clean this and come and tell me when you're done.
Yeah. And I think that companies, at least what I've seen from our company, like I started and I was like the 68th employee or something, and now we're over 700. And like you have these, and you have these like growing pains where it's almost like if you have people that know business, which our leaders know business, like it almost looks too top heavy in that growing pain area to where it's like, oh, I'm the VP of this room. Oh, I'm like there's just so many VPs that you're like, okay, if anything goes wrong in any quarter, we're so top heavy, this shit's just gonna fall. Like, because there's so many fixed salaries that are not necessarily income generators.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost scary because you're just looking at this monstrosity of a top heavy organization,
Mm-hmm.
but you can see why it's important in the long term of like, okay, those positions are going to fill out, they're going to be needed, but like I can see the wisdom of that, like hearing you talk about the 3-year-old in the dirty room, like, okay, you got to have those people in place, even if you're kind of bailing water to pay their salary to make it eventually be worth it. As long as they're like productive and they're doing their job and you're going to work into making that infrastructure relevant, like it just is very stressful looking at a company that I was part of during those growing periods. I'm like, holy crap, like we have as many VPs as we have people answering the phones. Like
Right.
there's just a VP in every corner. But now it's like, okay, these departments are growing and like you can see why they were needed 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it takes someone who's kind of been around the block in business to kind of find that balance, because I think you could easily tip in the other direction
Mm-hmm.
and go too top heavy and have a disaster.
Well, and there definitely is a balance. There's a balance of when you bring those people on. And the thing that I would say is the most important is when you're building infrastructure and you do have those people that are your overhead, they're not your income generators, they have to be A players. Because an A player can work as much as 2 or 3 B players, right? And I talk about this all the time. The thing about A players being the ones that get after it, they can get it done, they can do so much work, and they will hire other A players. So you can actually run a really lean team. If you get any B players in there, even on accident, and you can have a highly credentialed B player with a great resume, you've really got to look out for them. What's scary about them in any organization is B players are afraid of A players, so they won't hire them. They don't like B players either because they don't like competition. So they will only hire C players, which to me are like the leeches of the business society. So
Yeah.
when you're doing that, when you're building that infrastructure, who you hire becomes even more important than when and how many you hire, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I've seen the company that I work for, like, go, okay, like this I was a perfect example. Like when we knew each other, like, and I was in Austin, like they hired me a recovery specialist before I even needed one,
Mm-hmm.
because like she was a personal trainer for the bodyguards for George Bush, and like she was very qualified. So they're like, okay, like we're good to great style, like get the right people on the bus, and this is a right person that we don't want to take another job, and we want to make sure that even though like you're not busy enough for this person right now, we know that eventually you're going to be
Right.
busy enough to where like we want to make sure that we lock up a good team member for you.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that to where like there are people that we don't necessarily even have a job description for them,
Right.
but we kind of get that impression during an encounter with them that we're going to like build a job description for them, because you can tell that they're just going to like kick ass and take names.
Which is awesome and totally worth it.
Yeah. So what other like common threads have you seen to where like, do you get a lot of pushback with like office politics, or do you just kind of lay the law down when you come in going like, hey, like this is the way it's going to be. I'm giving you an objective like opinion of what's going on here, because a lot of people don't like you calling their baby ugly.
Right. Well, it's interesting. So there's definitely a polarizing thing about what I do. And one of the things that I offer anyone who's going to work with me is to do this complimentary 3-call process where we get to know each other. And what's great about that is I spend some time understanding them and their business. And at the end of that, I'm going to give them a plan that they could execute on their own if they want to. They don't necessarily need me. But in that process, I can identify someone who will not work well with me. And there are people who I won't take on as clients. There are companies that I won't take on as clients because their values don't align with mine and I don't think will be a good fit. So it's really important that they have full buy-in on what I'm coming in to do. When I come into a larger company, one of the things that often ends up happening is there are almost always instances where one employee will either self-select out or get fired in a week. And that seems to change everything, because what I end up finding somehow is that one employee that was like throwing off the culture for everyone. So while you never want to let someone go, I'm always, well, I mean, I don't say never. I don't relish firing people, but if you're not a good fit, I'm okay with you leaving because I'd like you to go be successful somewhere else. But what I find is so interesting is normally firing this one person, or again, sometimes they'll self-select out. They'll be like, this woman's crazy, I'm leaving. What will happen is that remaining set of employees will just come together and the culture will become so much more cohesive. It's amazing. So most of the like ruffled feathers and rocked boat is in the first 7 days.
Yeah, so you're kind of finding the McCarthyism, like communists in the room, or like the turd in the punch bowl that's just kind of like poisoning the energy of the whole company.
Usually, and it's not a lot of people, but it is amazing to me how much impact that one person can make. And the fact that as a leader, if you literally asked all your good people, hey, I'm going to fire this guy or this lady, and you're going to have to work double for the next 4 months until I find someone. Do you want me to let them go? 9 out of 10 people would go, hell yes, just get them out of here.
So do you run into some like difficult personalities of people that are like not really willing? Because I tell people like I enjoy being evaluated even by someone like who's less experienced than me. Like I don't care if somebody who is like been in practice for a year wants to come watch. In like if they have a question about why I did something, I'm like, I did that because I was lazy. Like that's not the right way to do it. Like I was just like 15 minutes behind and I knew it was going to get the job done. Like I think that if you want to grow and you want to improve, like tell people, even Tiger Woods has a swing coach. Like,
right?
He's not going to like just look in the mirror and flex and go, oh, that swing looks great. Like he's still going to have somebody call him on his shit if he's screwing up, and hold him accountable. Do you it seems to me that you'd run into some pretty difficult personalities in some of these higher level companies, to where they may not necessarily take like constructive criticism or suggestions very well.
It's interesting. Here's what I find. I find that the people who are more abrasive towards getting feedback, it's funny, that's actually one of the things. People who are not open to feedback and instruction, they're more ego and pride. Those are people who can't be accelerated. But what I find is funny is it's the people who don't want feedback that usually end up being the person that self-selects out or gets fired. Because people who want feedback, people who know they're doing a good job, people who are confident in what they're delivering for their company are excited to hear how they could do better, because that's what they want to do every day. So yeah. I don't run into that many. I'm picky about who I work with. I think that's part of it because there's tons of companies out there. You know, I've been employed by some of them, right? Especially when I was really young. But I don't run into people that often that don't want to get better, that also end up staying where I'm working.
So what are your like future goals for the company? And I definitely want to discuss some of like your philanthropy and like some of the stuff you've done volunteer wise and charity wise. So let's go. Which one do you want to discuss first?
We could talk about where I want the company to go. I want the company to go to the stratosphere. I want it to be an empire, something amazing, because there are always people who can be helped by acceleration. And what I love, some people get confused. They think I'm a consultant, and I am the anti-consultant. I do not like consultants. No offense to any of you out there who are great. Because in my experience in the corporate world, wait, is your mom a consultant?
No, I said Bob.
Like I thought you said mom. And I was like, oh dear. No, so I'm sure there are great ones, just like anything else. But in my experience in the corporate world, consultants talked a lot and didn't do very much, and they charged a lot. And I never knew what the company I was working for was actually getting. So I work to metrics, to certain things that are going to happen versus, someone paying me hourly, weekly, or whatever. We're actually paying for things to happen. So that's really important to me. And it's really important to me to work with as many companies as possible so that they can quickly get to where they want to be. So as much growth as we can do. And I've added a couple things, a YouTube series that's launching next month to help folks who might not necessarily be able to hire me, but would benefit from the things that I can help them with. I want to give back that way, especially for entrepreneurs and leaders who are just looking to accelerate some of what they're doing. So anything and everything that creatively comes to me as a way to help people and businesses, I'm all about it.
Yeah, and I think that like giving high quality free content away is another reason why I started like some of my social media stuff and the podcast and the blog, because like I don't necessarily agree with everything that like Gary Vaynerchuk has to say, but I've read his books and I read Jab 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 Right Hook, and like it's like give so much stuff away to people that is high value and not just filler, and people will have it on their conscience that when they are begging you to sell something, that they will support you.
That's true. I mean, it is like, I can definitely see how that works. Plus, if you're doing it from, like you said, from that place of, I just want to help people, I want to get this information out there, it's even better because I think people can feel your intent.
Yeah, like people can see through it if you're like and Gary Vee talks about this all the time too. He's like, it drives me nuts that people that haven't done it in business are going to sell you the $19 ebook on how to make it in business.
Right.
It's like, you got to walk the walk before you write about walking the walk and tell people how to walk the walk. Like, it's like, and I'm not going to listen to somebody who hasn't done it.
It's so true. And those are the people that sell programs out there a lot. And I actually ran across someone who was selling a program that talked about, I'm selling a program on how to sell, and I actually sold. And like for me, I build sales organizations and I made 7 figures being one of the people helping build a sales organization. I don't think that I would ever want to buy something from someone if I didn't want to be them, have their life, have whatever it is that they had and what they were doing, if that makes sense, right? It's like you don't want to hire a fat personal trainer because obviously they don't get it.
Fat chef, yes.
Yes. And don't trust a skinny chef.
No.
I'm just kidding.
So like, and I think that like a lot of these X factors that no matter like what people go into, because we've like tried to dissect out like personality traits that make people good at certain things. Like we've tested a lot of our doctors, like upside down, inside out personality profiles, like level, like compassion scores and all this other stuff. And it's like, I think that a lot of our good people just have good emotional intelligence. Like they're in it for the right reasons. Like they care about you enough to take good care of you, but they don't care more about you than you care about yourself. Like you got to pump the brakes on those people. Otherwise you're never going to get any sleep at night.
Right.
And you're just going to be bitter. But I think that like someone like you can make friends with a fence post in 5 minutes. Like we could put you in any career. So I think that a lot of that X factor is like likability, ability to form like a tribe, a community, relationships, maintain connections, like go, all right, I know this person, they do this, you need this, this is my friend. And like you build like this web of people around you. And I think a lot of that is just like stuff you can't teach in an ebook or like learn for $19, or you can't even pay someone the kind of money that they're paying you to teach somebody to do that. It's just like, it's just kind of the person that you are. Like you can mold people to a certain extent, but there's some of these intangibles that are just not able to be taught, to where it's like, all right, do you know how to like not be super awkward? Are you likable? Do you care? Are you compassionate? Can you communicate? Like there's kind of this blend of like X factors that are really hard to teach, and you can't buy it for $19 on the internet.
Right. That's true.
So then there's certain people, like they're not necessarily a good doctor, but people like them and they're super busy.
Ooh.
Like there's
scary.
like they're not hurting people,
But they're helping them.
They're not necessarily helping them that much, but they're super busy because like people like them. But it's not like they're surgeons and they're like cutting people open. These are like colleagues to where they have wellness-based practices, and like people may be like getting better, but they may be staying the same and they're just keeping them from getting worse. There's not a really objective way to prove prevention or wellness.
Okay.
But and I don't think these people are harming people, but there's a lot of people that I went to school with, and they were like in the mid pack on the grade level. They made it through, but they're just people. Like if they weren't in medicine, they'd run a bar and they would crush it because they could talk to anybody.
I don't see, but I disagree with those people being in business in that sort of. I just watched a video. I think it was Nick Saban who was talking about, get the mediocre people off the bus, and I was like, no kidding, because I don't feel like there's room for mediocrity in anything, really. I mean, go work at, McDonald's or somewhere where no one is expecting this certain quality. I think that if you're working in healthcare or in business, or I would probably say everything, because I'm the anti-mediocrity person, but I think that you should be passionate and you should be helping people every time you walk through that door.
Yeah, and I don't think that type of situation is scalable to where you could build a company off of it. I think that's not a business. It's more of a self-employed like model, to where the one I was talking about.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Where like, I know that look. So I was talking about the people that are really likable, but they're not incompetent. They're just not like people that I could like
who have a singular
really complex cases with.
Yeah.
So I think if you were to give someone a score 0 to 100 on competency, and then a 0 to 100 score on like communication, likability, they have to add up a certain score for someone to be successful. But some people are just super high on one end and like kind of low on the other, because I see just the opposite, to where people are super competent. They can diagnose anything under the sun. They can recite Grey's Anatomy word for word, but nobody likes them. They're like Dr. House, but less interesting, and they need more drugs, so they're more entertaining. And just like nobody likes them, like they don't connect to people. Like, so I think there has to be like a sprinkle of humanity like in there, to where people are like, yeah, that person's a person. They screw up every once in a while. They swear every once in a while. Like they have bad days, and they can connect to me at a human level, and they're kind of good at their job.
I get that.
But I think to run a business, it's a little different. Like you have to connect with, like, I think I'm talking more like boots on the ground people that are like the face of the product, rather than like the people that are the skeleton of the business structure. Like those people we know, like with Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, like they would have been diagnosed autistic if it was right now. But then they have zero people skills. Like you almost have to lock them in a cage by themselves, but they still run successful companies just because they have people that are kind of good at that around them to kind of buffer them.
Almost despite themselves.
Yeah, that's why like the country was kind of protected from Donald Trump when he wasn't a politician with an uncensored Twitter account, but now he can do whatever he wants. Like before it affected stock prices, now it affects nothing, so he just doesn't shut up. So let's talk about is there any other things you want to talk about with the business before we jump into like some of your other passion projects?
No, I think we covered most of it. Absolutely.
Okay. So let's talk about some of your other missions, like with philanthropy, charity, that kind of stuff.
So one of the things that I do with the work that I do is it all has a charity element. So in some way, shape, or form, everyone who works with me is then tied into philanthropy. And it's very important to me because in my background, I actually share this on my website. My story, there was a successful businesswoman who took an interest in me when I was a child. And she made all the difference in my life because I really did come from a place where people didn't graduate high school very often, much less go to college or any of those things. And she said, that's possible for you. This whole life is possible for you. And because she was so successful, I completely believed her. And it really instilled in me a need to give back to children who are underprivileged and help them understand how special they are and what they can do. So another part of my business is that philanthropy platform of my global mission, which is to improve the lives of children around the world. And I do that by helping my businesses either come up with ways that they can allow their employees to volunteer and or give back in their community on company time, or they actually make donations as part of working with me to either a charity of their choice, or if they don't have one, they're close to a charity that I can direct them to. And as my business grows, I want to grow that movement even more as well, because I think that children are, even though I don't personally have my own children, I think that children are the best thing that we can do from a legacy perspective for our community and the world. I know lots of people are doing things focusing on going to space and building these great companies, and those are amazing things and they're important and have their place, but nothing is more important than preparing the future of the world to be great, functioning, independent, and successful human beings.
Yeah, and we did a charity event with the company, and we built bunk beds. So we raised money with
Cool.
some of our docs and some of our employees, and we were able to build like 34 bunk beds to get like 70 kids off the floor. And we got together, we built them, like put them together, and then they delivered them the following week when all the chemicals were leached off of them to where we didn't give these kids some disease. But like it was super cool and gratifying to do that. And all of those kids were in San Antonio. So there's like,
That's awesome.
there's some people that think that you have to like go to war-torn Africa or Eastern Europe to find poverty, but like there's a lot of need in town, right under your nose, and that's perfect evidence of like Marisol works at Title I middle school, and a lot of those kids are like they're shuffled around to a bunch of different houses, and
Mhm.
like a large percentage of the school is homeless, and like the family specialist is giving these kids food to take home on the weekends because the only regular meals they're getting are at school, and
Wow.
it's just a really humbling thing, and it makes you very grateful for like having the luxuries that we have, like I call them WPP, white people problems.
Right.
Where like I got home yesterday, I'm like, oh, my AC's broken, but like in an hour it was fixed, and
Right.
like we went to bed at like normal temperature, but a lot of these kids are sleeping on the floor, and that's when the brain is super plastic, and we're developing all these neurologic connections, and like these kids are either building confidence or losing confidence for themselves. And I think that the more we can kind of build like an environment to where they know they have at least a fighting shot, and I think that's really important, and it doesn't take very much, and you don't have to travel the world, like it's right under your nose. So I think that's very important. And make sure that you send me the name of some of your favorite uh, charities, and we will make sure we post that in the show notes for all two of our listeners. Uh,
For both of them?
yeah. And we probably will lose both of them, or they'll just like put a paper over my side and just watch you talk.
You know what? I'll send you that. And if you want it in your show notes, do you have the ability to put something that you could download or no?
Yeah.
Okay, I have literally a handout that I'll share with your listeners if you want, which is those characteristics that support being able to accelerate and the characteristics that hinder. Because it's awesome to like look at it for yourself, because everyone has these. Everyone has the good ones and the bad ones, and really figure out, okay, what might be holding me back from what it is that I'm trying to do. Because acceleration isn't just for business, right? It's for every different area of your life. So it could be very helpful.
Yeah. So is there anything else you would like to discuss?
I think I'm good, but I really enjoyed being part of this. Thank you so much. And I love your podcast. I love your Unbroken Minutes. I think they are super valuable. So hopefully you'll get some more listeners out of this other than those two really loyal ones that you said you have.
Yeah. And one's my mom and one is Madi. So, and if you want, Madi wants to say hi when we're done.
Oh, awesome. Absolutely.
Excellent.
All right.